everybody, welcome to another lesson of learning Japanese. Today we're going to be covering another grammar pattern which is going to be using the primos form of a verb or the stem form of a verb plus the phrasing nasai to mean basically do that verb, or sometimes it can be translated to please do that verb in a kind of polite sense. So this is one of the grammar patterns that is usually taught relatively early when you're learning Japanese, and it shares a lot in common with the other grammar pattern that we have covered for, which is using the te form of a verb plus the phrasing kudasai to mean basically please do that verb. So in this lesson we will of course be doing examples in the context of this grammar pattern, but we'll try to also point out how it's different from that one that is very similar to, and other ones that kind of express the same idea of please do this or do this. So primos form plus nasai is one of those ones that uses this kind of weird phrase that you don't really know about other than it being used in this grammar pattern. Like nasai, have you ever heard that anywhere else? The same could go for that other grammar pattern that I just mentioned that is similar to this one, te form plus kudasai. That grammar pattern is used a lot because people are asking people to please do something a lot, but do you really know the origins of the phrase kudasai? So while you don't really need to know at all to understand this grammar pattern and start using it yourself, we're going to go through a tiny bit of context for both of those because the context will help us understand how they're different or how they differ. So kudasai is basically a special conjugation and imperative conjugation of the verb kudasaru, which is in turn the honorific form of the verb kureru. So kureru is a word that we actually should know because it's pretty common. It's also used in other grammar patterns. It basically means to give. And so if you give it a little thought, it kind of makes sense as to how the grammar pattern is working now, because if we change the word to give into its honorific form to make it honorific, even if you in turn change that into a command form, which is basically telling someone what to do, there's still a degree of course politeness or respect there because you're doing it honorifically. So that right there pretty much kind of explains why the grammar pattern te form plus kudasai to mean please do that verb, that kind of explains basically the please in there. It's being polite, it's still honorific in its roots. The grammar pattern that we have here today, primos form plus nasai, is working kind of the same way, slightly different, but that difference helps us know why or how it differs from the te form plus kudasai. So the phrasing nasai is the same special conjugation, that imperative conjugation, but this time it's for the verb nasaru, which is in turn the honorific form of the verb suru, which means to do. And so pretty much the key thing to point out here is that since suru means to do, that's a bit different from kureru, which means to give. So even though we use the same formula, we turn suru into an honorific nasaru, then we turn that into a command, so it's still basically polite because you've turned it honorific even though you've made it a command. When you look at the definitions and you're telling someone to do something, suru, as opposed to give me something or do me the favor of something, well then of course the nasai is going to sound less polite than the kudasai. Kureru means basically to give, but it also has this special concept in Japanese in which the giving is kind of like you're doing me a favor, you're gifting me with something. And so that right there is actually going to turn out to be pretty much the biggest difference between this grammar pattern, primos form plus nasai, and the other grammar pattern, te form of verb plus kudasai. This one is going to be still polite because of that honorific form, but it's going to be more forceful. And so a lot of situations in which this is going to be used is when the relationship between the speaker who's telling the other person to do something and the addressee, that person being told to do something, is going to be one of kind of a like a superior to an inferior, or an older person to a younger person. Something like a parent to a child, or a teacher to a student, or a boss to a intern or employee or something. So they can use this form while still being polite, but it's more forceful. So yeah, just because a parent isn't saying please when they tell a child to do something, that doesn't necessarily mean they're not being polite to them. Alright, so we should pretty much know the construction of this grammar pattern just by the title there. We're going to take the primos form or the stem form of a verb, and then we're going to attach nasai after it, and that will be please do that verb or do that verb without the please, depending on context. So a quick example of that would be something like the verb yameru, which means to stop. Take the primos form of the stem, yame, plus nasai, yominasai, stop or please stop. Okay, so now before we jump into the example sentences, one more key difference between this and the te form of verb plus kudasai. This one is more of a technical one and might be more important, to be honest. It's that this grammar pattern can't be used with it can't be used in a negative way. So with the negative form of verbs, we can do that with the te form plus kudasai. Instead of the te form, we use the naide form, and that'll be like, please don't do this. With this grammar pattern, we can't do that. We can only say, please do something. We can't say, please don't do something. So because of that restriction and because of the nuance of how it's usually being used by conversational partners in a superior-inferior dynamic, it's not quite as common as the te form plus kudasai grammar pattern, but it definitely is still heard in everyday speech. So definitely good to learn, and we're going to learn it right now with some example sentences. Alright, so for our first example sentence here, we're going to go with the line yasai o tabe nasai. What this will translate to quite simply is just eat all your vegetables, or please eat all your vegetables. Let's break down the sentence bit by bit. First up, we have yasai, which means vegetables. After that, we have the particle o as a direct object marker. Now we're going to use our grammar pattern here, so of course we're going to need a verb. Our verb is going to be taberu, which means to eat. Change it to the stem form, pre-mas form, tabe, add nasai. Tabe nasai means eat, as in telling you to eat. It's a command, you eat. Or maybe in some translations it'll be please eat. So combine it all together now, yasai o tabe nasai. This is going to translate to eat all your vegetables. So yeah, hopefully this is proving to be a pretty simple grammar pattern. Let's go into another example sentence. Our next line will be go aisatsu o chanto shinasai. And this will translate to basically properly greet your seniors, something along those lines. If we were to naturalize into English, we'd probably say remember to greet your elders or your seniors, just because that's a common phrase. But in this case, it's just saying greet your elders properly, or not even, it doesn't even have the word elders in there, it's implied. So it's just greet properly. So let's break it down word by word. First up, we have go aisatsu, which is going to be the word aisatsu, which means greetings, but it's having the word beautifier go before it. So it's kind of identifying it as a formal cultural thing that kind of deserves respect. If you need a lesson on word beautifiers, we do indeed have a grammar lesson on that, so check that out if you need it. Right after that, we have the particle o, which is of course going to be working as a direct object here, which also of course means that a verb action is about to come, which is just going to be the regular verb suru, which means to do. To be honest, this sentence is pretty much just the grammar pattern itself, because the verbal noun aisatsu suru is basically being used here. We're just using it in the other form where we use the direct object marker o between the verbal noun and the actual suru. So aisatsu o suru basically. And yeah, so what we're doing here is we're changing suru into its pre-mas form, so it turns into she, of course. Then we just plug in nasai and it becomes shinasai, and that means do, as in I'm telling you to do this, you do this, or please do this. And what is the this? It's the verbal noun aisatsu, which means to greet. So that would be greet. Oh, whoops, forgot the adverb there, which is chanto, which means basically well or properly. So do this well, do it properly. Properly greet is what the sentence is literally translating to. We're going to kind of flourish it a bit when we translate it into English, so remember to properly greet your elders, basically. Alright, so that's going to wrap it up for examples for that particular form. We're going to do one last mention here. I do want to mention this kind of more shortened version of this grammar pattern that also kind of gives it a different nuance. I was debating whether or not to give this a separate grammar video or not, and we might do that in the future just so that it's easier for people to find this topic and it's just not nested in this topic, which the title won't give the indication of this one. But yeah, so what it is basically we're using this grammar pattern, pre-mas form of verb plus nasai, and then we drop the sai in nasai. Pretty weird, right? So for example, if we had taberu, change to the pre-mas / stem form tabe, then we add nasai. So tabe nasai of course means eat, do you eat. It's a command, but then we drop the sai and it just sounds really weird, tabe na. And that's actually really confusable with the grammar pattern that is the dictionary form of a verb plus the character na to mean don't do that verb. But in this case, the pre-mas form as opposed to the dictionary form plus na is going to mean do that. So do eat. And those are complete opposites there. Dictionary form means don't do it, pre-mas form means do it. The difference is taberu na and tabe na, and those, of course, by ear, you might miss a character and it might be completely identical to you, so watch out for that. But back to the topic of this one, tabe na, that is going to mean the same thing as tabe nasai, but it's just going to be another notch up in the forceful scale. So you're kind of more confident in saying it to the person. You're more confident in telling them to do it. Another quick example, if we had the verb miru, change that into the pre-mas form, it turns into mi. Nasai, minasai means look. Then mina will be look, a bit more forceful. So yeah, it's a quick tidbit at the end here, something that you might want to watch out for because it can trick you up, and of course it's just good to know because you might find some cases where it's appropriate to use it too. So yeah. Okay, so that's going to wrap it up for this video. I hope you learned something and I hope you enjoyed your time doing so. If you'd like to express that, you can like the video, leave a comment below, or subscribe if you haven't already. If you'd like to support more of these video lessons, please do consider checking out our Patreon page. Also included on the screen right now are of course a bunch of links on where to find and follow us elsewhere online. Lastly, check out our Discord server. We've got a community of hundreds of so if you're looking for somebody to voice chat with just to practice speaking Japanese, or if you just want to talk about anime or music or manga. And with that, see you next time.